It may be a few days late, but it's time to go over every retro handheld device I got in 2022. Let's get to it. Hello and welcome to Retro Breeze. 2022 was pretty much a landmark year for retro handheld gaming devices, with the likes of the Odin, the Steam Deck, and a whole myriad of other interesting devices released. I grew a modest collection this year, and I'm going to go through every single one I got and a quick overview of the device and my thoughts on it. You're going to want to stick around to the end of this video where I'll be revealing my top 3 handheld gaming devices of the year. Let's get straight to it, starting with this little guy, the Kitty RG353V Pro. The RG353V Pro was my first ever retro handheld emulation device, and I'm really glad it was. It's a dinky little thing with a very pleasing candy bar-like shape, heavy thunky buttons that I just love. In fact, these face buttons are still among my favorites ever, and an open source firmware. The RG353V Pro is almost unique in the retro handheld market because it's one of those devices that does one very specific thing very well. Now don't get me wrong, the Kitty RG353V Pro can do all sorts of different things. It can emulate more or less up to Dreamcast fairly well. But for me, this is almost exclusively a Game Boy Advance device. In fact, I believe the RG353V Pro may be the best GBA ever made, including the original Game Boy Advances. It has an extremely bright and vibrant and colorful 3:2 aspect ratio IPS display. That means you get pixel perfect scaling and a full screen experience on Game Boy Advance games. I currently have mine set up to only have Game Boy Advance games on it, and it launches directly into the games list for Game Boy Advance. This is still my go-to device when I want to play a GBA game seriously. Recently I wanted to play Sonic Battle Story Mode from start to finish, like I did on my GBA SP when I was a kid, and there was no other choice for me than the RG353V Pro to play this game from start to finish. I'm really glad I got this device first because it was also fairly cheap. I think I got mine for around £45 at the time, and it's such a hackable device. I've opened this up, I've cut up the inside of the case to put in a bigger battery. It has an iPhone 10 speaker I believe in it now. It was just such a great fun device to get introduced to this market. Great for tinkerers and perfect for Game Boy Advance. Next I got the Retroid Pocket 2 Plus. This was the first device that really completely blew me away. I mean, the performance on this is still unbelievable. And there was one thing on this device that really hit me when I first got it, and that was Sega Saturn. I booted up Sega Rally, and the last time that I had tried to emulate Saturn, it was a really bad experience even on PC. But to pull this thing out of my pocket and just be playing Nights into Dreams or Sega Rally right there on this really tiny but really great bright screen was just an unbelievable experience. I also think the Retroid launcher is still one of the best software experiences available on a retro handheld device. I loved the Retroid Pocket 2 Plus so much that I bought one for my brother, loaded it up with like 500 gigs of JRPGs, and he's loved it too. Even with the existence of the Retroid Pocket 3, I still think the 2 Plus is an excellent device in its own right, especially if you're looking for a 4:3 aspect ratio display. Next up, we have the Miyoo Mini. And what can really be said about the Miyoo Mini that I personally haven't already said on this channel? I absolutely adore the Miyoo Mini. It is definitely one of the best retro handheld emulation devices ever released. It has an absolutely tiny form factor, you can play it with one hand, and it can emulate everything up to around PS1 without any issues at all. The Miyoo Mini also has the single best custom firmware available for any device that has ever existed in the history of the world. Onion OS is the software that I wish every single other device I've ever owned had. It is that good and that enjoyable to use. The Miyoo Mini excels in letting you quickly jump in and out of games with very little friction, and it's absolutely perfect for JRPG style games, top-down RPGs, especially the likes of Pokemon. You can throw this into any pocket or any bag, throw it out, and be playing your game in 5 seconds. Then you can power it down in about a second, put it back in your bag and move on. It really is an excellent device. The ability to play it with one hand is also excellent for travel. For example, if you're on a crowded bus and you need to hold on to a bar, you can still play the Miyoo Mini. That's very unique. Next up, I got the Kitty V90. And I know the V90 has a very passionate user base, but I never really got into it. I understand why people like it, and I know that there's no other option for like a small clamshell like this, a Game Boy Advance SP style system, but I just never really came around to it. I think I had been spoiled by the Miyoo Mini already by the time I got the V90. However, I do see the appeal of this device, and I really hope that somebody else, maybe not Powkitty, but somebody tries this form factor again. Though I do find it really strange that it doesn't have that 3:2 aspect ratio display. I would think that a GBA clone device would have a GBA style screen, but hey, it's not a big deal. Unfortunately, I exploded mine by putting the wrong battery in, and I haven't racked up the courage to plug it in again since then. Next up, I got the Aon Odin. Now this is probably the device I've covered the least on this channel, which is funny because it's certainly one of the best devices ever made. But I'll talk about that a little bit later on. For now, the Odin is a big powerhouse of a device, with a Snapdragon 845 overclocked to about twice its usual clock speed. It emulates everything up to GameCube and PS2 extremely well, and knocks everything else below that completely out of the park, including heavily upscaled PS1 and Dreamcast. The Odin, in my opinion, is pretty much a perfect device. There's nothing about it that I don't think is absolutely spot on. From the ergonomics, to the buttons, to the triggers, everything about this feels like a device made to be an excellent gaming device. It's almost like every minute detail was tuned to perfection. I really do love it that much. My Odin is by far my most played device this year, even though I just haven't covered it on the channel. Aon as a company have been through a lot of trials and tribulations, and I disagree heavily with a lot of the things they've done, but more or less that all involves the Loki and not the Odin. The Loki being their new handheld PC. But as far as the Odin goes, regardless of all the numerous issues that it had getting to market, Aon has done a very good job being very transparent with the situation and what was going on. And I have to say, I didn't have a huge problem getting my Odin. I got it in about 4 months from ordering, so I wasn't waiting years like some people, but I do think that no matter how long you've been waiting, believe me, this is worth the wait. It is that good. I should also mention I have an Odin Lite, but it's in a drawer under my bed. I haven't touched it because, well, the Pro is perfect right now. I'm glad to have a second Odin though, just in case this one ever dies, because I can't imagine being without it, honestly. Next up was the Gamex A380, and what an interesting device this was, sent to me by my good friend Mikey. The A380 being a weird device isn't enough of a descriptor for this, it's so freaking bizarre. First of all, there seems to be no determinable manufacturer. I could not find who actually makes this. It says Campaign A380 on the back, which appears to mean nothing. However, the device itself runs on a Rockchip RK3128, which is a fairly capable processor, and it can play everything up to low to mid-range PSP okay. It can even boot into Android 6, which is a little weird, but it does work and is pretty fun. Mikey sent me this device to see if I could get RetroArch working on it because it didn't by default, and I was actually able to get that going, so I was really proud of that and it was a really gratifying experience. However, in the process of doing that, I found out the most disappointing and baffling design flaw in the Gamex A380, and that is that the analog sticks are directly wired to the D-pad and face buttons. So the left stick is exactly the same as the D-pad, the right stick is exactly the same as the face buttons. This cannot be configured, it is a physical limitation. I have absolutely no idea why they would do this. And it's a real shame because I think had this not been the case, the overall package for the A380, in terms of price to performance, and I would say even screen and speakers and build, is really excellent for around $50 or so. But unfortunately, it's just a lazy product with a huge design flaw that means it's just not recommended. Next we have the Retroid Pocket 3, and what an absolutely beautiful device this is. Honestly, the Retroid Pocket 3 was second only to the Aon Odin for me. I absolutely love everything about it, and it still has one of the best screens I have ever seen on a retro handheld gaming device. It is one of the most bright and colorful screens I've ever seen. Add to that the D-pad being on top, making it perfect for retro gaming, excellent performance up to and including PSP, and you really have a winner of a device. It is seriously incredible. However, yes, I'm gonna go here and I'm gonna say it. Retroid absolutely betrayed and shafted every single buyer of the Retroid Pocket 3 by announcing the 3 Plus just 2 months after the announcement and release of the 3. Now, there's a lot of divided opinions on this, but my perspective is this. There is absolutely no possible way to conceptualize and bring a product to market in 2 months. Even if most of it is the same as the previous one, it is just not possible. They knew that they were going to launch the 3 Plus when they launched the 3, and they were banking on people buying the 3 first and then having to upgrade or buy the next one, or just miss out on the better device. It is so sketchy, and I think Retroid should be ashamed of themselves for doing this to their customers. I'm a little bit emotional about this, honestly, and because of it, I just haven't played my Retroid Pocket 3. And I've disqualified the device from any of my top 3 favorites or whatever this year. I cannot stand by what they did here. I think it's absolutely despicable. And it's a real shame because the Retroid Pocket 3 is truly an excellent device. Next, I got a rather larger device called the Steam Deck. Yes, of course, we had to go there as well, the Steam Deck. It is obviously an absolute powerhouse of a device. It's big and massive and bold, and it's really in a separate category to everything else on this list. I really can't compare it. As an x86 device running AAA PC games versus retro handheld emulators playing PS1 games, you really cannot compare it. But the Steam Deck is in a league all on its own. It is an incredible device with an unbelievably good control setup, a great screen, absolutely incredible speakers. It is just such a joy to play. Despite its huge size, it's very comfortable, and just I like everything about it. Except for the fact that it's a PC and not a game console. This isn't really a negative in my book, but the Steam Deck is definitely a PC and not a gaming console. And with that comes all the complexity of a Linux-based PC. And I have had so many software problems with the Steam Deck, it is unbelievable. From my very first impressions video I uploaded to this channel, I mentioned that the sleep mode seemed to be completely broken on my device, and to this day it still is. I am almost completely unable to sleep any game. Recently I was playing Final Fantasy VII Remake, which is Steam Deck verified, so it should run completely perfect. But it crashes every single time I put the deck to sleep. I'll put it to sleep, I'll try and bring it back up a few minutes later or an hour later, and the whole device will reboot. It is very bad. But that's not to say the Steam Deck is bad, that's just the nature of the thing. Next I upgraded my Nintendo Switch to the Switch OLED. I love the Switch, it's amazing. I held off getting one for several years, I don't know, I just wasn't really interested. But now that I have one, I wouldn't be without it. I absolutely love it. And the OLED model is a real elevation to the original device, with a much better screen. I love the way the screen fills out more of the front of the device. It's just an all-around excellent gaming console. I think that if I were to have the guts to jailbreak the Switch OLED using a mod chip, I think this might be the best retro emulation device possible, but I'm not going to do that because I don't want to break it. And I don't want Nintendo to sue me, so yeah. Next is the Kitty X51, and you know what, I just really like this thing. I cannot explain why, I just like it. There's something about it. It's clicky, it's chunky, it's completely and utterly broken in its software, but there's just something really fun about it. I said in my original review that it kind of seems like a child's toy, and I think that's a pretty accurate description. I would never recommend anybody ever buy this product, it's pretty abysmal, but there's something about it, I don't know, there's just something about it that I really like. And I think the one thing that stands out on the X51 is its unbelievably good screen for its price. It is really, really great with its screen. Unfortunately, the issues being that you cannot save PS1 games, and you cannot save Game Boy Advance games. You have to use save states, to me, really makes this device almost unusable for those systems. And if those small flaws were rectified, like Kitty has promised me several times they are being, then I think this would be a much better device than it is. Alright, we're down to the last two this year, starting with the Anker RG353V. Now I don't have this one anymore because I gave it to a friend of mine for Christmas, but I really, really loved this device. It was an excellent vertical handheld with a really nice screen, great performance, and pretty good ergonomics as well. It was actually my second real vertical device after the Miyoo Mini, and I was really impressed with the build quality, with the software and everything. Honestly, I just really liked everything about it. And it's kind of why, when I thought about my friend who had been interested in a retro handheld device, I really thought that the RG353V would be an excellent introduction, because it's just kind of like a Game Boy, it's kind of familiar, but it has everything you need to play a bunch of different powerful systems. Yeah, and I just really liked it. Add to that big community support, custom firmwares, and everything like that. It's just a really cool device, and I really liked it. So the last device of this year has not yet made an appearance on this channel, but it will be very soon. And that is the GKD Mini Plus. I don't want to spoil my upcoming videos, impressions, and review of this device, but I will say I find it quite abysmal. It is a very bad device. To me, it feels very uncomfortable no matter which way you hold it. The construction is incredibly cheap, it rattles like it's a maraca if you just so much as touch it, and the analog stick attachment is just really unintuitive. I mean, it works, but it blocks the speakers, it's uncomfortable to hold, it feels very cheap, the white material they used for the plastic is different from the GKD Mini itself, the whole package is just really poor. And add on top of that, the absolutely awful software on this device. I've tested some terrible devices with bad software, but the GKD Mini Plus really takes the cake. It is so terrible, it's actually shocking. This is the most disappointing device of the year for me, and I'll be talking about it more very soon, but keep an eye out for those videos. Don't buy this, buy the RG353V instead. Alright, so that's every handheld gaming device I got this year. Finally, it's time to give you my top 3 devices of the year. And I think these are going to be pretty by the numbers, you can probably guess what they are. Number 3, the Steam Deck. It cannot be said, the Steam Deck is just unbelievable. It's so good, it blows everything else away in terms of performance. However, I haven't even bothered doing emulation on this thing yet, because I've just been really happy playing AAA PC games, and it does that so well. When you play something like Final Fantasy VII Remake with its absolutely incredible graphics on the Steam Deck, it's an experience like no other. The only thing I really dislike about the Steam Deck is the buggy software and the relatively poor docking experience, but hey, those are 2 minor details. Number 2, the Miyoo Mini. Yeah, of course it was gonna be. The Miyoo Mini is just amazing. It's so nice, and it's such a unique product that you can play it with one hand, and it's so simple to use, and that custom firmware is just amazing. I will say that between my top 2 and top 1, these 2 come very close. And my top 1 favorite device of this year is the Aon Odin. It's also my least covered device on this channel, but the Odin is truly one of the best retro handheld gaming devices ever made. The screen is amazing, the controls are amazing. Every tiny detail of the Aon Odin has been tuned to make this the most perfect gaming device it could be. And there's nothing quite like playing a PS2 game on here and it running perfectly. It's just such a good experience. I've played through several games: Empire of Steel on 3DS, Dirge of Cerberus Final Fantasy VII, Crisis Core, Sonic Rivals 2, all right here on this device, and I've played them all start to finish and I've had an absolutely incredible time. I love the Aon Odin. I think it is still yet to be matched in the retro handheld gaming space, and I'm so excited to see what they do with the Odin 2 this year. And that wraps up this video. Thanks for sticking with me this long. Let me know what your favorite retro devices this year are, and whether you agree with my top 3 or not. I'd love to hear what you think. Leave a like on this video if you enjoyed it, and please subscribe to my channel for more retro tech content. Here's to a very happy new year, and I look forward to seeing you again very soon.